Welcome to Stronger Together, a powerful podcast series hosted by Impact Community Services. I'm Tanya O'Shea, Managing Director of Impact, and I have the pleasure of frontlining this little passion project of ours. In the podcast, we dig into some of the many social problems that people are facing within our communities, and we chat with guests willing to have the hard conversations. We want you to be kept informed and updated on the latest information, yet are also aware that some of the topics address sensitive issues. We acknowledge that this could be triggering or distressing for some listeners, and we encourage you to pause the episode and seek immediate support. Information on where to seek help will be provided at the end of each episode. Before we begin, together we move towards an inclusive future by acknowledging the unceded lands of the Butchulla, Gureng Gureng, Waka Waka, Kabi Kabi, Wuli Wuli, Taribalang, Gurung and Biali peoples. Now let's dive into this episode of Stronger Together. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Stronger Together. As you know, in the community, we're hearing a lot about the cost of living crisis. People are finding it really challenging to make decisions about where they're spending their money because it's in really short supply. So are we spending it on food, put food on the table? Are we spending it to clothe our young people, our children, so that they can go to school? Where is it going? Is it on medication? People need vital medication, and it's a real concern when we hear about people having to make these decisions around whether they spend it on food or whether they actually have to forego meals, dinner at the table to actually spend it in other vital areas that they need to keep their family sustained and living and actively involved in the community. So I'm really feeling incredibly privileged today to have Jess Watkinson from Foodbank Queensland here with us. And Jess and I first met as part of being committee members on the 2025 Anti-Poverty Committee for Queensland. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you were able to join us. I feel like Foodbank Queensland, what an incredible organisation in the work that you do. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, because I certainly see your brand is something that is easily recognisable, and I certainly see you as leaders in the community when it comes to supporting Queenslanders, to supporting everyday Australians who are experiencing food insecurity within our communities. So Jess, tell us a little bit about you. What's your background? How did you end up at Foodbank Queensland?
Well, like most journeys, it wasn't planned. I've been most of my life was in Darwin, and I've been in the not-for-profit and government space for over 20 years. I did some work early in my career around food security with Red Cross in the Northern Territory around school breakfast programs and food security, and then was with YWCA and with both the Northern Territory and Queensland governments, and then have moved into Foodbank Queensland. Really, at the time when the opportunity came up, I thought, I don't have a huge amount of experience in warehousing and logistics and supply, which is a big part of what we do. But also I know that food is a human right, and all of the areas that I've worked previously, food insecurity has been an impact for so many people, and it's so prevalent in the country that we are, a first world country, where we're saying that Australia-wide it's one in 3 households experience some level of food insecurity, and 1 in 5 households are actually experiencing hunger, where they're actually skipping meals or going days without eating. And now that's terrifying. And for me, it's working in an organisation that I can be passionate about. And I think that that's what a lot of us do in this sector. It's probably why you're there, Tanya. And it's what has brought me here as well.
Beautiful. So you feel like you're living your purpose. You're very passionate. It's evident in everything that you talk about. You're very passionate about this complex social issue that we are working very hard towards. I'm just reflecting as you're talking about, I didn't know much about warehousing, and I think it's very important that we share the photo of you sitting, what you've got behind you in your background. We will share a photo of that with the podcast link. But tell us about where is that taken? Where is that photo of? Tell us more about that. Because it looks like you're in a warehouse, Jess.
Well, it is. I'm not. It's a background, but that is our warehouse in Beverley Street in Morningside. That's what we're coming up to our 30th year, and that's where we've been for the past just over 25 years. It's 1,800 square metres, which may not mean much, but we've just opened a second interim facility around the corner, which is 3,059 square metres. Now our constraints were around our capacity to take food. We know that there's a significant waste or surplus problem with especially our produce area. And for us, 46% of what we do is actually fruit and vegetables. And that's being donated by our amazing Queensland farmers. And that's coming to us. We like to be a simple solution to surplus food. So food that might otherwise go to waste can be utilised, either going directly to our member organisations and then out to people experiencing food insecurity, or through some of our partner organisations. So we provide a lot of food to Fair Share, who create then meals, frozen meals that come back to us and then go out to our members. But yes, we do a lot. We do around between 13 and 14 million kilograms of food per year. We've got a fleet of trucks. We have big walk-in chillers and walk-in freezers, lots of forklifts running around. So it really is an amazing warehouse and logistics activity that happens through our Chief Operating Officer runs that. But we also, that's us working in the food relief space. The other part that we're really focused on is actually moving towards food equity, because we could provide food relief all the time, and we would continually need to provide that. But unless we're actually addressing the causal factors of food insecurity and working collaboratively to address those and get to a place where there aren't any Queenslanders going hungry, then that's not going to make any difference. So we will provide food relief as long as it's needed, but we're working with communities in place-based and community-led ways to identify the barriers to food security in those communities and work to address them.
It feels like, I don't know, I feel like you're climbing a mountain, Jess. It's a big topic. It's a big issue within our communities. So I would like to talk more about food equity, but before we do that, so when I'm looking at the vision behind you, your backdrop, and it looks like the shelves are full. And you mentioned, 46% fruit and veggies, the amazing farmers who are donating product so that it's not going into waste. How does this work? Like, how do you run all of those forklifts, and how do you employ all of the impressive, amazing, incredible staff that you have to do what you need to do to make sure that people are getting access to the food? So tell me about that. How does that work, that supply chain? Where's it coming from? So the farmers are part of it. Who else is bringing the product and putting it onto those shelves in the warehouse? And then how do you pay for all of that? How does that work?
Great question. We actually prefer the term surprise chain, because that's what it is. When you're getting donated, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get and when and how much of it. So that is another factor. Mm-hmm. It's another factor in what we do. So we have donations, obviously, through our farmers. So we make it as simple as possible. So that could be that we provide them with equipment, what we call an FB4 bin, so that anything surplus can go straight into that. And we will collect that directly from the farm. We call that farm gate. And we will actually take that and then bring it back to our facility and then distribute it amongst our community partners. So that's a key part. We provide to member organisations and member charities who then provide it to people in need. So we're a business to business. When we talk with us, we're truckloads, not trolley loads. That all of that product comes in. We also get product donated through national partnerships with Foodbank Australia. So we have some really great partnerships. We have what we call a collaborative supply program. So that's where you actually get a whole group of different people who will donate in to make products. So one of the products that we have in that space is pasta. So somebody might donate the wheat, somebody might donate the eggs, somebody might donate the manufacturing line, somebody might donate the packaging, and then we can either get that free of charge or at a really low rate. So for us, 90% of what we work on with is donated, but we also purchase. There are significant numbers of things that our members want and need that we don't get donated, especially things with a long shelf life that does sell quickly. We often have to purchase those items, and things like proteins in cans, not fresh proteins, although we could always do with more fresh protein. We all know how great protein is. And we do things when we talk about that addressing of food insecurity. Some of the work that we do is around that advocacy space. So we are working to try to get a national food donation tax incentive. So if our farmers donate to us, they're able to have a tax offset for the cost of the product that they're donating to a food relief charity. And as we know, farming is a difficult financial model, and it's really our farmers are the lifeblood of our country, and we need to, where we can, be able to provide them with a way to make it as simple as possible with their surplus, but also providing something back. So we're really advocating on that behalf. So when it comes into us, we have our community partners. We've just recently changed our web ordering system to allow them to see a lot more of the products that we do have. And let me tell you, our facility is not always this full. We just took a photo when it was full. And so as it comes in, some things just go immediately straight out. We provide fruit, vegetables, fresh meat and bread and milk free of charge, but we do need to charge a handling fee to cover some of our costs on some of the other products. There's a misconception that we're very highly government funded. Our funding is around 20%, our government funding for what we do. The rest is through an amazing marketing and fundraising team, corporate partnerships, really strong supporters who are as passionate as we are about addressing food insecurity and moving towards a Queensland without hunger. So we have programs like our school breakfast programs where we're actually providing the products for kids in schools to be accessing breakfast before they attend school. And we know that that's encouraging attendance. It makes people, it allows you to be able to concentrate more. It improves behaviour. There's a whole lot of positive benefits to a school breakfast program. We provide the food relief directly through to our community partners and members, and we have programs like Feeding Queensland Kids, which we've got in Ipswich, Mornington Island and Bundaberg, and that's a really focused place-based project looking at the specific barriers to food security in those communities, and then actually funding solutions. And that's the difference there. Sometimes we know what the problem is. Sometimes we as Foodbank can be somewhat of an assistance in providing food, but we're not always the solution. And that's not what place-based and community-led is about. It's about being part of that conversation, bringing food insecurity into that conversation and looking at ways to work together to address the barriers. And for us, collaboration is key, whether it's with the community, whether it's with our other food relief sector partners. It's with we do a lot of work with our partners in the basic necessities space. So Share the Dignity, Baby Give Back, Thread Together, places like that, where we're really looking at what are the basic needs and how can we address those and how can we work collaboratively to do that. So we've got economies of scale. So we're not all hiring a truck. So we can, send things out together and really look at the best way to get what is needed to our communities.
Wow. So there's so much in that I love to unpack all of that, but we don't have time for today. But I'm hearing, working collaboratively. So we're saying we're not working in isolation. We're actually having to work with a range of partners. A big shout out to the funders, because this is such a vital service. So a big shout out to government funders, but also all of those vital corporate sponsors and the farmers that you mentioned. I love this idea that it's not just about Foodbank accepting goods in, it's also about that reciprocal value to go, thank you, but how can we now add value to you? So that idea with the farmers, I love that. And really looking at how that can be offset in some way. So you're being quite innovative in your approach as well. And one of the key things is please don't turn up with your trolley to Jess's warehouse because she can't fill it for you. But there are partners within the community who certainly will be able to provide that relief when it comes to food relief.
Absolutely. And if you go on our website, there's actually a Find Food button. And if you put in where you are, it'll tell you one of the amazing food relief charities or organisations within where you are. And that's really important. There's still a stigma attached to accessing food relief. And I would always encourage people to access food. If you need food relief, to access that food relief. And for people to be more aware of the fact that it could be your neighbour, it could be the person sitting next to you. We're seeing an increase in dual income households who are experiencing food insecurity and have never had to access food relief before, don't know how to do it, still feel a level of shame in doing so. And we just really want to get out there that food is a human right. You should be able to access it. And if you need food relief, to reach out and ask for it. And to be aware that it could be happening to somebody close to you.
Absolutely, and having those tools to be able to respond or give them some supports in how they do respond. It's such a challenge, isn't it, when we've got these really complex social issues and people, there's still stigma, there's still shame around it. But the other thing, Jess, is that it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're working. As you say, dual income families, are still finding it difficult to put food on the table. It's very challenging, but I love that. And we will include the link to your website along with the podcast so that people can easily access that and find that important button. Now, Jess, for when you talked previously, so the food relief, so we've talked about this bit. When it comes to the food equity, you mentioned that there are some certain projects that you've found in communities and doing that place-based response. Tell us more about how you're working in that food equity space.
We do that in a number of ways, and it is somewhat of a new space for us. We've traditionally just been that food relief, food in, food out organisation. So a lot of that is around working collaboratively to identify the barriers that are there, but looking at ways that we can collaboratively work together. So we do work with CSIRO in their Food Systems Horizons. We know that as farms and companies are focused on reducing their waste to reduce their environmental impact, that has a knock-on effect to having less product to donate to organisations such as ours to be distributed to people experiencing food insecurity. So we are not trying to stop that in any way, but we want to be part of that conversation. So it's been great with being part of those conversations is to bring that food insecurity and food relief aspect to those conversations. And that might mean that as the system changes and as we get less donated foods, then the business model that we have has to change, unless we're addressing food security to such a way that we're reducing our households. And the idea would be that as we work more towards food equity, we should be providing less food relief. And, it should be, we're more about food relief now, but as we get to a stage where the food systems are working well, people have access to the food that they need, the nutritious food that they need. We're considering some of those cost of living impacts that we have. The people that we talk to, the majority are saying cost of living is what is impacting their ability to be food secure. So if you think about rent, rising rent, and then you've got to put fuel in your car, you might have to have some medicine for yourself or your children, and then you have a very small amount left over for food. Then you get a bill shock So suddenly a tyre on your car goes and you've got to pay for that. The only spot that you've got that can be taken from is that food budget. So people are experiencing sometimes the food insecurity is occasional and it depends on a bill shock. And sometimes it is more longer term, and that is around access to food in regional and remote areas. We know that those experiencing food insecurity in the 2024 report, there was quite a gap between the regional and the metropolitan statistics around households that were experiencing food insecurity. That gap has changed in the 2025 Foodbank Hunger Report, but only because food insecurity in metropolitan areas has gotten worse and is now at the same level of regional. But we know from looking at especially remote stores, in some cases, you're looking at 3 times the price of food in a metropolitan area. So there's a whole lot of factors that we need to be working on and working with. And in some cases, it's working with already existing collaborative organisations and just making sure that conversation around food security, food access is on the table, and being part of those conversations and looking at ways that we can support or create linkages, create collaborations. Sometimes it's food, sometimes it's school breakfast programs, but it's not always us.
There used to be a time that you could look at a postcode and you could go, right, I can tell you a lot about, just by looking at the postcode, what the issues will be in there. And it seems from your feedback that it's actually not that distinctive anymore. You can't kind of just go that postcode, we know what's happening in there, because it can, it has spread more into those urban areas as well.
It has, but when you're talking postcodes, we have the hunger map where we're actually looking at the different locations, and you can to some degree do the looking at where it is and what might be there, because there aren't food relief providers in those spaces. And so we know that those people who are experiencing food insecurity aren't necessarily able to access food relief. And part of the conversations we have around food security is in disaster preparedness and disaster resilience, and making sure, so we do some disaster response, we do some disaster preparedness with some pre-positioned product, but we're also making sure that as we're planning for these and as disaster response agencies and the governments are working towards it, they're thinking about the fact that a household that was food insecure prior to a disaster is not going to have the capacity to go to the store that's already had everything bought out of it and have a supply of food during that time. They weren't able to do that before the disaster, and they're not necessarily going to be able to do that in the lead up to it. And so we need to consider that as part of our disaster preparedness and ensuring resilience.
Such a good point, Jess. Now, I mentioned earlier, and I think it was at the start, we met as part of the Queensland Working Group for Anti-Poverty Week, which is coming up from the 12th to the 18th of October. I had a mental blank then, and it's like October, November, December. How much it was speeding towards the end of the year. But so this is Anti-Poverty Week is when this episode is being released. And a big congratulations to you, because not only are you on the committee, you're the co-chair. Congratulations, Jess.
Is it a congratulations?
Congratulations, Jess. And I know you're co-chairing with Penny.
Yes, so, wonderful Penny.
You've been doing some beautiful work. So tell us a little bit about the collaboration that you and Penny, as co-chairs, you've been working on a particular project that you're going to, or you've recommended, you've put out to the committee. We're very, very receptive of the beautiful work you've done and the recommendation you've made. So tell us more about that project that you've put forward.
Excellent. Well, Anti-Poverty Week, we Penny and I were having conversations around what is it that we want, what is the purpose of Anti-Poverty Week? And it is around making sure the community are aware of just how many people are experiencing poverty. Obviously, the alignment for me is that the definition of poverty is having a lack of money for immediate basic needs such as food, housing and clothing. So obviously people experiencing poverty will be experiencing food insecurity. So we wanted to make sure that we were, one, making people aware that it's 1 in 8 adults and 1 in 6 children living in poverty here in Australia. And what we're doing, what we're able to do, and what you as a community member are able to do. And that's around signing up to some of the campaigns that are out there. So we are really promoting 3 of those campaigns: End Child Poverty, Raise the Rate, and Everybody's Home. And the way that we are doing that through the Anti-Poverty Week Committee is that we're actually having an event on the lawns of Parliament House on the 14th of October. We're bringing together people in the space who are working in the space and people with lived experience of poverty to come together to provide an opportunity for parliamentarians to come and talk to us about what is anti-poverty, what is poverty, how many people are experiencing it, and what are the things that we can do. And to then showcase some of those campaigns that are there to really address poverty. And we've got some people coming and talking about each of those campaigns to really highlight what they're about and the difference that they can make to poverty in Australia. And I'll also be talking about the Foodbank Hunger Report, which obviously has a real alignment to Anti-Poverty Week, and people experiencing poverty are usually experiencing food insecurity or hunger as well.
So you did mention Penny. Can you please give a big shout out to Penny, where she's from? But I think it's really important. I'm hoping she's listening to this. But please give a big shout out to Penny, because she's been incredibly critical to pulling this together as well.
Absolutely, she has. Penny Kramer is the CEO of Play Matters. One of the things that this committee has allowed me to do as well is to meet some fantastic people. And Penny reached out to me via LinkedIn and said, "Hey, do you want to be the co-chair of this with me?" And then I had a conversation with Penny, and I knew that we were the same people with the passion of what we're doing. And together it's been a 50-50. It's not one of those typical team projects where, you're doing a bit more than someone else. It's not been that at all. And it's been great working with Penny and learning more about her organisation, but also what we can do together and the connections that we can make to bring the organisations and people together that are really working towards making sure that we have reduced poverty levels, that we have reduced food insecurity, and that we're actually making a better environment for Australians and Queenslanders.
Beautiful. I love that you talk about collaboration as part of the work that you do with Foodbank. And sometimes we can kind of just put stuff out there and go, we collaborate. However, I love that example because it is such a beautiful, rich example of how you are collaborating, not just around this project, but you've found those similarities, you've found that values alignment, you've gone, we could be doing more in this space. So that collaboration for you, it just pours out of you. I guess you can just feel, that you really are purpose driven and you really are committed to collaborating with others. So thank you for sharing that. It was a beautiful demonstration of that. With this event, it's happening in Brisbane, the one that you've been organising on the 14th of October. Now, unfortunately, it's not a public event, so people can't kind of just buy a ticket or rock up to that. However, we have riffed. Thank you to both Penny and Jess, because we've riffed off their idea here in Bundaberg, and we've reached out to Jess and went, can we please do what you're doing, but we would like to run it here within our community. We think it's a really important initiative. We would like to highlight what you're doing in Brisbane. We want to bring it out to our community. So you've been incredibly helpful in sharing. What can we expect? So for those who come along to our event here in Bundaberg, what can they expect to see, Jess?
Well, if you're doing it the way that we're doing it, it's that information around those campaigns that are focused on trying to reduce and end poverty. You'll also be getting. We talked about what we would provide at this event, and we talked about breakfasts, and we said, it's a bit. How do we actually do this in a way that is reflective of the event and the week? And so we've actually put together, and I believe you guys are doing the same thing, some little bags that hold what we provide as part of school breakfast program. So that's going to have sort of little cereals, little milks, and fruit cups and a muesli bar, similar things to what we would provide in a school breakfast program, to show some of the ways that we're providing some support to people who might be experiencing food insecurity and or poverty. Chances are for those people who are experiencing poverty, that food insecurity becomes as part of it. So things like school breakfast programs where there's a dignified way to access food without any judgment, because anyone can go and access it, is so important. And that's so important in workplaces as well. So in doing all of the work that we've been doing, we've identified that potentially, according to the data, there's likely people in our organisation who are experiencing food insecurity. And we do know that from some of our staff members, but we also think that it's more prevalent than it would be based on the data, because 22% of households earning more than $95,000 are experiencing food insecurity. So we've actually got a pantry at work where people can access breakfasts, and we know that then that increases focus and attention, and therefore safety and the way that people work. And I've gone off track there around the event, but I think we can really
I love the information. I love that. I've stolen the pantry idea straight away. I've written that down. Go, what a great idea. Yes. Sorry, that's it's okay. But that symbol with the symbol with the bag, and it is a symbol, isn't it? Because I know when the idea was being curated, and you mentioned that originally it was kind of like, oh, we've got to feed the politicians, we've got to give them some breakfast. That was the idea. And then the idea around, let's link it so that they kind of make that connection that this is the reality for some people. This is what they kind of get to sustain them maybe through the day. This might be the only meal they get.
Yeah. And it just seemed a bit wrong to be serving canapes and lovely little bites of things on an event for Anti-Poverty Week. It just seemed it wasn't palatable to me. So and Penny and I both agreed on this, and the whole committee. I don't think everybody said, oh, that's what we should be doing. We should be really looking at how that connection can be made.
When we were talking about this from Impact's perspective and going, okay, we want to do what you're doing. Tell us what you're doing. Can you share? And one of the things that stood out for me is that you've been very deliberate around what you're putting in the bag. So yes, the items, but also the nutritional value of those items. And Jess, one of the things that kind of stuck with me is you said, oh, look, you might find it really tricky to source some of the healthier options for some of the things that we've talked about. They're not as readily available as the things that might be filled with sugar or have lower nutritional content. So that was interesting to me. And you said you've had to be making connections with certain suppliers to make sure that yes, there's items going in the bag. Yes, they're food. However, we also want to be making sure that they're valuable in relation to nutritional content. Why is it so hard to get access to this nutritional food or food that's got high nutritional content?
I think when we were talking about that, it was around individual portions. You'll find that most individual portions aren't necessarily the most nutritious, but we do see a lot of the nutritious products can be more expensive. And we only provide nutritious products for school breakfast programs. Obviously, there's guidelines around food in schools, and so we have that requirement. But you do often find that it's the non-nutritious things that are going on sale more often. It's decisions that need to be made in your weekly grocery budget is around what will fill a belly rather than what will provide the nutritional value that's needed for growth and learning. And we know that diets early in life have a direct correlation with health later in life. So an early intervention in that space can have huge positive impacts on our health system in relation to chronic disease. So it is really important that we consider that nutritional value. of what we're providing. We can't always, as a surprise change, sometimes what we're getting is not always great value. But like I said, 46% of what we do is fresh fruit and vegetables. But also there's the dignity of choice. And we do want people to be able to have celebrations with their families and, have a cake and have something sweet. But the focus for us is to look at what we're providing that's nutritional, and definitely for our school breakfast programs, we're not doing Fruit Loops, we're not doing those sorts of cereals, and we didn't want to reflect that in what we were providing on this day as well. So.
No, thank you. So you did mention the hunger reports, and when you think about, I guess, the importance of that report, what does it inform? Like, what do you use that information? How does it continue to drive what you're focusing on as Foodbank Queensland? And even Foodbank Australia, I guess, Jess.
Yeah, so it is a Foodbank Australia publication, and it does have state-specific information. We utilise that to guide both our advocacy work, but then when we're looking at the food equity space, to really understand what the food insecurity landscape looks like and what we need to be working towards. We also utilise what I talked about was the Foodbank hunger map, and that actually looks at a range of data sources, including income levels and a range of things to identify where you would have food insecurity, what level of household that would be, how much food they would need, and then how much is being provided. So part of that hunger map, we actually do that collaboratively with the other food relief providers, OzHarvest and Second Bite Fair Share. And we can actually see that for Queensland, together as all the food relief sector organisations, we're only meeting 37% of the need. So we need to be data informed in what we're doing. We utilise that data in our planning. We utilise it as part of our targets for what we're aiming towards. Our theory of change talks about some of that data findings and what change we want to make in that. But it also allows us to see what's changing from a positive and a negative space year to year, and where we need to focus, because first and foremost, we want to be addressing food insecurity and hunger. And if that is changing as to where that's happening, metropolitan versus regional, whether it's changing around the types of households, i.e. is it dual income, is it international students, is it students in general, is it who is actually experiencing it, and where is it getting worse? So we know that that's where we need to focus, and where there needs to be a focus for change in what we do, in how our programs ourselves work, but also those that we're working on collaboratively in the food equity space, where they need to be focused on, and then also utilise that in our advocacy for change. If there's something specific that we can really see a decline in, that really needs a focus, and there needs to be some form of system change, that can inform that. And we know that governments use this information, and it is utilised in a number of ways. There's a national food security strategy that's being developed, and for the first time they're really thinking about food insecurity and food relief as part of that, whereas previously it was, how are we growing things, how is it getting there, what are we exporting, what are we importing, how much are they charging at the shops, and that hadn't really considered that food insecurity or food relief space. And so having externally validated data and information around the true landscape around hunger and food insecurity in the country is really vital for us to be able to drive change.
So data is really important. So it informs policy, it supports government to make their decisions, it supports you with your advocacy that you're doing. Since your time in the role, what gives you the most hope that we can tackle this really gritty problem that we have around food insecurity in Australia?
I think for me, it's that people are really willing to work together with you. And I really am passionate about the fact that no one organisation, no one person is going to make the change that needs to happen in the world. And being able to work collaboratively with our food relief sector partners. So we actually have a collaborative government-funded program that is ourselves, OzHarvest, Second Bite Fair Share, where we're actually together, we got funded to deliver the Feeding Queensland Kids program that's in Bundaberg.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that we can do that in a way where we're all coming to the table going, food insecurity and hunger is an issue. Let's work together. It's not about being competitors. And then let's look at how we can address that. And then the collaborative ways that we're working with amazing organisations throughout Queensland that are doing that work around basic necessities and the willingness to actually go, okay, let's look at the problem. Let's identify that it's not necessarily us that are the solution. And let's just put all our cards on the table and look at how we can work together to address something. And every time I see that in action, I get re-inspired about doing what I do. And we've got an amazing impact and engagement team. That's where Feeding Queensland Kids sits. That's led by the amazing Tara Day-Williams. And every time I see some of the work that they're doing and that collaboration that is just the way that they are, it just reminds me that even though it's going to be a long journey, that there's a whole heap of change that needs to happen that is, some of it is out of our control, obviously, that there are good people who are passionate about what they're doing and who will continue to work in this space to actually look at getting towards this, vision of a Queensland without hunger.
Love that. Comes back to the people so often, doesn't it? Who are driving some of these key initiatives. So you're listening online and you're going, okay, Anti-Poverty Week, I want to be part of that. How could others who are listening to this, how could they get involved? Really simply, what would you suggest, Jess?
I would suggest just going on to the Anti-Poverty Week website. It talks about all of those 3 campaigns and what you can do to actually make a difference is to sign up to those campaigns. Because when we're talking about change, people are the voice. People are what will make the change. And when you've got the majority of Australian population signing up to these campaigns and saying to the politicians, this is important to us. We don't want to accept that we have poverty in this country. We want to do something about that. That's when we'll start to see the change. And we have power. There's power in passion, there's power in people. And so if you're listening to this and you're not able to get to one of the Bundaberg events, if you weren't at our event, I would suggest going, just Google Anti-Poverty Week and have a look at those campaigns and see if there's one that really rings true with you, or all 3 are likely to ring true with you, and sign up to those campaigns to show that that's what you want, and for us to be able to share with the politicians and with the people that make decisions that this is something that Australians are passionate about, that they want changed, and that they will vote about.
What a great, strong, powerful message. Great call to action. Use your voice, people. Sign up to it. Say that this is actually, it's not okay. It's unacceptable. So please take that great advice that Jess has just shared. So we've talked about food relief. We've talked about food equity. And you've touched on people actually living below the poverty line. What does that actually mean in today's society?
Well, how we define poverty is the poverty line works out to be $489 a week for a single adult and $1,027 a week for a couple with 2 children. And we know that 2.34 million people live below that poverty line here in Australia, and that includes nearly 774,000 children. So it's really, when you think about those numbers and people that are on some of the payments that they're getting, you're not able to get above that poverty line. And that means that you don't have enough money for those basic needs, your basic human rights of your food and your housing and your clothing, let alone the ability to then move out of that poverty.
And we talk a lot about mental health. We talk a lot about physical health.
Yeah.
We need food to nourish us, to keep us physically well. We need food, and I guess the worry of having to try and find money to feed yourself or the family, I mean, that must play a lot on people's mental health. So it's just such a complex issue and so many parts to that. But I certainly recognise that must be an incredible struggle. And that's a lot of families. Can you just repeat that figure again? How many million Australians are under the poverty line?
2.34 million people. And that
Wow.
includes 774,000 children. And you're so right about we know that, that parents are going without food so that their children can eat. Mothers are skipping meals so that their children can eat. The load on families who are not able to provide what they need to for their families is huge. And so you have not only those physical health impacts of poverty, but there are also those mental health impacts. And, you just want to do what's the best for your family. Most people really want to do what's best for their families, and to have that added burden is huge. And we shouldn't be accepting that as a society.
Absolutely. So, Jess, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya, and thank you for having these conversations and allowing for people to really hear about poverty here in Queensland and in Australia.
No, thank you. There's a couple of things I just want to do to finish up. So I wanted to give a big shout out to Mark Jeffrey, but also the committee of the Anti-Poverty Week Queensland Committee for all of the amazing work that they do in preparing for that event from the 12th to the 18th of October. But also that key event on the 14th. So there'll be more, I guess, in that space, but that's going to be an event at Parliament House in Brisbane. So that's exciting, I guess, to hear that that's happening within that community. Also, it's happening in Bundaberg, so you will hear more about that. That's out in the community. It'll be coming your way. But those two key calls to action, okay? So one of those, if you would like to raise your voice, if you think that it is unacceptable that many people are experiencing poverty within Australia, please go on to the Anti-Poverty website and just click on the link and say, actually, I'm supporting, this is not okay within our country. And the second one, if you are experiencing food insecurity, Jess mentioned, go onto the website, Foodbank website. We've included the link as part of today's podcast. So jump on the link. There is no shame or judgment around this. Please get what you need to. The resources there. So, yeah, amazing work that you're doing there at Foodbank, Jess. Thank you so much again for your time. And we look forward to you joining us next time on this episode of Stronger Together. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.
We understand that some topics in this podcast may have been sensitive or triggering. If today's conversation has affected you, please consider reaching out for help. Lifeline offers 24/7 support at 13 11 14 or via online chat. For those in the Wide Bay Burnett region, Impact Community Services is here to help. Visit impact.org.au and click the Make a Referral button to self-refer. Again, thank you for tuning in. If you found this episode informative, please subscribe today. And remember, we're stronger together.